And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wager Alarm live stream here on everywhere you could watch videos, including wageralarm.com. Craig Mish in the house as always. And tonight, Howard Bender is off, and so we bring in our resident college football wagering and DFS expert, Dan Servadidio. Dan, it's been a while. Good to work with you tonight.
It has been a while, Craig. I'm just glad to be here with you, man. We're talking about college football. We
Yeah,
got
that's
the
right.
week zero games are in the books. We got Thursday, Friday going underway, but a lot of Saturday action.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun tomorrow. There's games, of course, going on right now on Friday night. For those of you who listened to our and watched our Tuesday live stream, we gave you the one pick, and so Matt Sells knows, and the world knows if you went back and watched the live stream. We got off to a good start last year. We were 1-0. We got off to a good start this year. We're 1-0 also with the under in the Utah BYU game, which honestly, Dan, I didn't see the end of it because it ended at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm the old man in the club. So, of course, I'm done around like 11, 12 o'clock. I don't know if you caught the ending of that, but luckily for me, that thing was just under the 47.5 points. So we got off to a
Yeah,
good start. But I thought, for opening night, it was pretty cool to see Clemson play. And Travis Etienne had a huge game. And of course, they ended up rolling over Georgia Tech. And a little bit of an appetizer on Thursday night. Tonight's games in general, and I've been watching them a little bit, not really all that scintillating, which is kind of usually what Friday night college football is. There's usually one or two good games, and we'll see that. But Dan, I think tomorrow we'll probably end up getting some good ones.
yeah, we've got a lot more top 25 teams. There's only two in action tonight. Wisconsin headlining that, but yeah, I think this weekend, you usually don't get a lot of those marquee matchups. I think maybe the past couple of years they try to get one or two of those top 25s. But yeah, this year the only one is Oregon Auburn.
Right.
So that'll be definitely the headliner of this weekend. And then, you get a couple other, the Sunday night, it's weird. We got Sunday night and Monday night matchups too this week,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Yeah, the college football usually Labor Day weekend will put a game on Sunday night, Monday night, and of course, for those of you who are living in the state of Florida, like me, I hope all of you guys stay safe, and certainly I hope I'm back for the Tuesday night live stream. But as many of you know, for people who have followed me through the years, I live in South Florida, and so right now I'm kind of staring down the barrel of this Hurricane Dorian. So we'll hope for the best for everybody in Florida. I know that, of course, I'm hoping that this thing shifts a little bit, so I don't have to worry. But that, of
Yeah.
course, puts other people in danger. So hopefully everybody stays safe. And we could kind of start there, I think, Dan, because anytime that there's a weather issue, it brings up an interesting topic. And the one game that we can start with, which is the first game on the board, because again of weather, they put it at noon tomorrow. They switched the location of this one, and Boise State will take on Florida State. They've moved this game to Tallahassee, and the Seminoles are -6.5 in this game. And so, look, there's really no data that points to things one way or the other when it comes to natural disasters. Obviously, the teams were not prepared to play in Tallahassee. They thought they were going to play this game in Jacksonville, and the crowds, I can't imagine, will be huge for this one too. But depending on how you see it, Dan, it seems to me maybe the points could be a little bit low being an issue, but either way, Florida State clearly having one of their worst seasons last year that we've seen in a long time. Do they rebound? Do they get off to
Yeah.
a good start against Boise State in week one? Let's break it down. FSU -6.5, now playing at home against Boise State.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to ignore the fact that Florida State's going to be playing a true home game now. I mean, before, they're playing in the home state of Florida, which is definitely advantageous compared to Boise State. But I think this definitely benefits Florida State, even if the crowd is a little so-so. I think the people that will stay around, hopefully, as you said, the hurricane and the storm kind of takes a turn for the better. And if that's the case, then we might get a good game. And the noon kickoff is really interesting too. I know that they're trying to get it in before the worst stuff comes, even in the evening tomorrow night. But I think that noon kickoff will kind of negatively affect Boise State as well, just because Florida State's going to be waking up in their own beds. That whole narrative.
Sure.
Boise State's got the noon. We've seen in the past any team that's traveling across country. They'll obviously be there a couple days earlier, but
Right.
the fact that they're have to play at noon instead of having all day to get ready for a 7 o'clock Eastern kickoff. I think that affects this, and we've seen the line actually move up or longer in favor for Florida State. I think it was at 4 around 4 before the game got moved to Tallahassee. So yeah, 6.5 Florida State. I like Florida State in this. I think one of the key things though, even if this game was not moved at all, Boise State's offense is very different than from what we saw last year. Last year they had Alex Madison, they had Brett Ripien at quarterback and running back respectively, and this year they have a brand new 2 starters in that, and this offense is in flux right now. I think it's going to take a week or two to actually see what this Boise State team actually is compared to last year.
Yeah, and look, there's no doubt that regardless of, I'm guessing that the Broncos have been in town for at least 2 or 3 days preparing for this thing, if not longer. That's definitely true. But it can't be easy having to switch venues for sure. There's no doubt that it favors Florida State in this matchup. But what we're going to find out very early on in the season, Dan, is are there big improvements from the Seminoles last year to this year? Because honestly, they didn't deserve to be a favorite in any game that they played last year. It was one of their worst seasons in a long, long time. And once Jimbo Fisher left, obviously he left behind a little bit of a disaster there. So we got you down there, 6.5. You'll take Florida State. That'll be our first pick tonight on the live stream. I will start off with my first pick of the weekend. This will be an early game also tomorrow. I've got Toledo playing at Kentucky. The Wildcats are -12. We talked about this on Tuesday on our live stream. This is one of the early leans of me taking Toledo, and I'm going to stick with that. Now, of course, last year, Kentucky had a great year. They won 10 games. They won a bowl game. It was a phenomenal year for them, but they lost more players to graduation than any other team in the country. Toledo's key is staying in this one and being able to run the ball. There's no doubt. They have a running back named Bryant Kobach, who I think people are going to get to know a little bit more this year. He scored 14 touchdowns last year. He's also from Kentucky. So a little bit of a revenge factor there as well. Kentucky also lost 3 defensive starters last year. So I think for me in this game, I do think that Kentucky can win the game. It would not shock me to see Toledo win. The Wildcats were one of those teams last year that had a magical season playing in the toughest conference in college football, but they also had a lot of veterans and guys that could keep them on the field like Benny Snell are no longer there. So, Dan, I see Kentucky winning this game, but I think the spread is way too high. In fact, the spread started off 13.5, went down to 13, even down to 11.5 in some spots. I'm seeing 12 right here. So what I'm going to do, Matt, is I'm going to ask you to grade me on this, on giving me 12. I would say for those of you who are playing online, and if it goes to 12.5, you could buy yourself a half a point and get 13. I would recommend that if you're playing where gambling is legal. If you're playing where it's illegal, if you're still playing online anyway, buy yourself a half a point. Don't be stupid. So I'll take Toledo plus the points, Dan, for my first one at plus 12 in this one. So that'll be my first one. Any thoughts on that before we move on to your second game?
Yeah, I mean, just on that line in general, I mean, I don't know how you think about, the different numbers and the way they kind of Vegas does this, but a 12-point favorite for an SEC team at home in week 1 against, not a great rival. I mean, it's not even a Power 5 school. I think you're right. I'm with you with this because this line just stinks, and the fact that it's been going down more and more. I mean, the fact, you mentioned it, Kentucky loses so much from last year. They had that darling season where they almost upset a couple, big games there. I'm with you. I don't like this for Kentucky. Personally, for me, I just stay away because this is the kind of thing where I'm just like, I don't want Kentucky. I don't want Toledo. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And listen, opening week, sometimes the big favorites can cover. But I just think in this spot, and historically, by the way, I think Kentucky in game 1 is living off a little bit of what they did last year, and you can't make that assumption from year to year. But look, Vegas knows what they're doing, and certainly Kentucky could end up, going on top in this one 21-0 and will look silly. But I do think that this is more of a ball control type game, and Toledo has enough offense for me, I think, to keep it close. So I'll take Toledo in the points. In fact, you'll be hearing a lot of underdogs from me, which is rare for a week 1 of college football for me usually. I'll go with those big favorites, but not this year. All right, early game number 2 for you, Dan. We've got Ole Miss at Memphis. Memphis is -6 in this game, and the total is 67. And boy, Rich Rodriguez has fallen quite a bit, huh? He went from Michigan's head coach to Arizona's head coach, and now he's the offensive coordinator for Ole Miss, and he is a very good offensive coordinator, so perhaps this will help them. We'll see. Matt Luke, of course, is Ole Miss's coach. He has been very underwhelming. They've been on probation. They really have had nothing to play for. So the kids didn't really have that motivation to win themselves 6-7 games. They weren't going to a bowl game anyway, but last year they were 5-7. Memphis, of course, has been very good offensively, which is why the total is 67. And Memphis is also coming off 5 straight winning seasons, which is impressive. But in order for them to cover in this one, Dan, they'll have to win by more than 6. Memphis -6 against Ole Miss. Who do you like?
Yeah, well, in general, I like this game to go over. I think the 66 or 67, wherever you find that line or that spread, I think it's going to go over that. These two teams last year, they played no defense at all. I mean, Ole Miss's defense gave up over 36 points per game. Memphis allowed over 31 points per game. And then on offense, both these teams just scored at will last year. The Rebels scored over 33 a game, and the Tigers more than 42 a game. I just think, and one thing to note, though, that the Ole Miss offense has a lot of changeover from last year, especially with their wide receivers. So it's a little iffy as to who it is stepping up for them this year, and especially in week 1. But I see the going over with 66 for Ole Miss Memphis, because these two teams, we saw time and again last year, they go back and forth scoring. Both these offenses did it last year, and I think it's going to keep up with this, and especially the noon Eastern kick. The Memphis weather is supposed to be 70 degrees there. I think both defenses could get tired easily. That's not really a factor sometimes you think about betting, but just the fact that there's going to be so many offensive plays run in this game. It's going to be, fast-paced, higher scoring than normal, even though 66 or 67 is higher than you would think for a college game, especially for, some of the Big Ten schools or whatever. But
right,
I could see both these teams scoring, close to, 35 to 40 points each, and maybe we hit, close to 70 or 80 points. So I'm going over in general. I'm not going to make a pick on the game. I'm not really.
Well, you're making
sold.
a pick on the total. That's a pick, regardless.
I'm not sold on either team right now, as you mentioned. Just some turnover with Ole Miss and
sure.
Memphis. I don't know how to think about them right now, but I like the over to hit.
Okay, so no defense, says Dan Servadidio. By the way, we'll grade you out. Sells, mark them down for a 67. That's what the total is now.
I'll take
so
it.
We'll go over on 67. You heard it from Dan Servadidio right there in the noon Eastern game, Ole Miss versus Memphis. So that's Dan's second play. My second play, I'll go back to another underdog, even a bigger underdog than the one that I previously have. My games never look ugly, but hopefully they win. That's always the point. Last year, it was a lot of ugly picks, but this is what football is about: is expect the unexpected. So I'm going to take Louisiana Tech plus 21 at Texas, and here's why. So the key to keeping this game close for me, and I've watched both these teams play a lot last year, is Louisiana Tech has a very good offense. They can run the ball. They can throw the ball. They can keep the game close with Texas. Can they win? I don't know. But Texas's defense on the edges is going to be the issue for Louisiana Tech. That's the only thing that will keep this game, I think, from maybe even being a 3-point game. They have 2 freshmen on the left tackle and the right tackle spot. That's a little bit worrisome. I want to mention that up front just in case this game goes sideways. I think that would be the only reason why. If you see very early on in this game and you see that their offensive line of Louisiana Tech is keeping Texas at bay, and you don't even bet the game, what you can do is you can get involved in some in-game live betting and probably get almost the same spread. So that's just something to keep an eye on in the first quarter. Skip Holtz has been very good against the spread since he's been at Louisiana Tech, especially against good teams. Texas, for whatever reason, under Tom Herman, they've lost the first game of the season 2 years in a row outright. So this is a little bit more of a dangerous spot for me than Toledo. I'm a bit concerned that I could get wiped out in this one. But Sam Erlinger, who is a Heisman Trophy candidate for some, for others, they think that he's more of a game manager, more of a ball control type guy. That's kind of the way that I see him. And I don't think that he is Herman's quarterback. I think that next year you're going to see a gunslinger, which is kind of what he wanted to do, like he was when he was at Houston. Erlinger doesn't take a lot of shots. He doesn't throw a lot of picks. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And that's why Texas had that good run at the end of last season. So I have Texas better than 2 touchdowns against Louisiana Tech. And I think in a worst case scenario, I think La Tech has a chance at the end of the game, even if it's out of hand, to get a backdoor cover. So line was about at 20, went up to 21. I'm not really worried about the public money in this one. And Louisiana Tech over the last couple of years has been a very solid college football team. They don't have a ton of turnover. Their quarterback is back. He threw for 3,000 yards last year. So, Dan, scary on paper, but the money doesn't get scared. I'm going to take Louisiana Tech plus 21 at Texas tomorrow night.
I got to tell you, Craig, I am not against you on this, okay? As a Maryland fan and an alum, I saw Maryland beat Texas in the opener last year, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And, that was a Texas team that was getting a lot of hype, just like this year, preseason. And, I mean, Maryland's not good, so they probably shouldn't have won that game. But I'm kind of with you. I mean, I think La Tech isn't a pushover like we see with so many of these other week 1 mashups. They're not going to lose by 35. So I like this.
Yeah, and Louisiana Tech, they would have not played a game yet. So this is not like you're getting to week 7 and we could look at their record and they're 3-4 and the kids are getting ready for finals and they're not into it and they know they're not headed for a bowl. I mean, those are the kind of games you got to be very careful of when you get past the midway point in the season. But in week 1, everyone thinks they could win the championship. So
yeah.
I think just too many points here given away. I think Texas wins the game, but their strength is keeping the ball and running the ball and not making mistakes. Is that 3 touchdowns worth? Well, listen, if their defense shows up tomorrow night and they completely sack the quarterback over and over again, I'm sorry. Then that is definitely a concern because, again, left tackle, right tackle, brand new kids. But I'll take them, and I'll take them to cover the 21. All right, your next game, Dan, is Virginia Tech, Boston College. Right off the top, a big ACC matchup here. Virginia Tech is -4 on the road. Of course, Boston College has one of the best running backs in the country in A.J. Dillon. Matt Vrabel's son, Tyler Vrabel, is the quarterback for Boston College. And here's why I'm curious about this one for you, Dan, is because going into the season, Virginia Tech, their defensive coordinator, who's been there for a million years, Bud Foster, August 1st decides to announce that he's retiring. But not retiring on August 1st. He's retiring at the end of the season. Virginia Tech, they just keep losing year after year since Frank Beamer's been gone. They had more kids go into that transfer portal and leave than any other team in the country this offseason, and nobody really knows why. Do they not like the coach? I'm not really sure. But Virginia Tech is getting some love here at -4 at Boston College. So I don't really have a strong opinion on this one. So I'm curious which way that you would go in this one with the opener at BC. They're getting 4 points. Virginia Tech on paper is the better team, but are they in turmoil? What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, you put it perfectly. That the whole offseason and the last couple of years for this Virginia Tech team just not living up to what I think the public thought they could be. But the main thing for me here, Craig, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but Boston College at home getting 4 points in an ACC Week 1 matchup. I mean, not a lot of teams are playing conference rivals in this Week 1. I mean, Boston College is going to be amped for this, in their home stadium. I just think I'm shocked that they're this big. I thought maybe it'd be like a pick 'em or maybe Virginia Tech's favored by 1 or 2, but more than a field goal for Boston College. I'm taking that.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned A.J. Dillon. This guy. This is what the Boston College offense is. It runs through him. He's going to be. He is one of the top running backs in the country. He's going to be trying to get into Heisman conversation maybe if he has a big year, and then eventually going to the draft, he's going to be one of the top backs there. But Dillon going against his Virginia Tech defense, and as you mentioned, their coordinator, maybe they'll be a little motivated with their coordinator saying that this will be his last season. But this Tech defense gave up over 200 rushing yards a game last year.
Yeah, they were horrible. I don't know what happened to them. Yeah, and by the way, with Bud Foster, that's a good point. But I think that a team gets motivated in his last game, not his first game.
Yeah.
And so we get to the end of the year, I'd be more inclined at that point, whatever Virginia Tech's line is, to take them. but I'm 100% with you on this one. In fact, one of my picks this year is taking Virginia Tech's under on their win total. I believe it was 6.5, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're one of the more disappointing teams. Their head coach is on the hot seat, and I think what a way to get started on opening night. Yeah. I think that not only can Boston College cover, I think they could win the game. So exactly. I do think that the -4 is too much. The other thing that I would tell you is that I would love a little money line action of just taking BC to win outright. So I don't know what the money line is, maybe +130, something like that is usually with a 4-point spread in college. So I think that's a solid pick from you. Boston College plus the points at home in their first game of the season. I think we're going to find out a lot about Virginia Tech very early on. If we're wrong on that one and they end up winning that game, then maybe they've put some of that turmoil behind them. But no one can really point a finger as to why all these kids are transferring. But they did have a lot of them in the offseason, and not a couple of their best players, but some of their intermediate type players, which tells you that they have a chance to play and they still don't want to be part of the program. So a lot of pressure on Fuente, I think is Justin Fuente. Is he the head coach of Virginia Tech? Yeah. So I think there is some pressure on him. Okay, my third and final game, the third underdog. Don't think I've ever. We did this all last year. I don't think I ever picked 3 underdogs in a row. This would be my least favorite of the 3. But I do feel like we owe it to the people in week 1. And normally, as we've done it here on these live streams, whether it's been college or pro, I've been very transparent with this. When it comes to the very big games on television, the public games, if you're not forced to wager, there's really no need to get involved in these sort of games because there's not a lot of an edge. Both teams are really good. The public knows who they are. Vegas knows who they are. And so I don't see a distinct advantage in this game. But I will say that for purposes of you guys watching on Saturday night, because I think this will be the first opportunity to watch the best game on the board, and Dan mentioned at the top, there's no doubt that it is Oregon and Auburn. Now, look, I went to the University of Florida, and I'm an SEC guy through and through. So for me to pick twice against the SEC on one live stream is far beyond something that I ever want to do. And so this is a tough game for me, but I am going to take Oregon and the points. I think that if you're going to take Oregon, you want to wait because this line just keeps going up. I think you'll be able to get 4.5 or 5. Now, that didn't do very well for Utah. For BYU last night. BYU was getting almost 7 points by the time that kicked off. Everyone was running to take BYU and take that 7 point at home, and that didn't work out. But in this one, it's a quarterback versus quarterback thing for me. Like, you have arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the country. All 5 of their offensive linemen are returning. And in the first career game ever for this kid at Auburn, Bo Nix, making his first career start, a freshman. Auburn hasn't started a freshman in 50 years. And are they going to go to a neutral site and beat the Ducks? I mean, maybe, but 4? No, I'm going to take the points here, Dan. I don't love it, but it'll be my third pick of the 3. It's kind of almost like me leaning toward a close game. I want to have a good close game on a Saturday night and see a good game. Look, Auburn could smash them in the mouth. We really don't know a ton about this quarterback, by the way, and that's a little bit scary. It could go one way or the other. Bo Nix, he could throw 5 touchdowns, or he could throw no touchdowns and 5 picks. Like, we just don't know. But again, I'm going quarterback versus quarterback strictly here. I'm going to go with the experience. I'm going to take the Ducks. I think they cover this game. I think it could be like a last-second field goal type thing, one way or the other. And if that is indeed the case, then you want to take the points here. So Sells, lock me in with a 4 here on Oregon. That's the latest line that I have, Dan. But a tough one. I could see the SEC rolling in this one. And the SEC versus the Pac-10. Last 7 times, they have had 2 teams ranked playing each other. SEC's won 6 out of 7.
Yeah, I saw that note when I was doing some research as well. And it scared me off of Oregon, and I don't blame you for taking them, though. It's really interesting, though, and to kind of relate this to something else I do, which is college DFS. When I was doing some research for that for tomorrow, Herbert is 5th or 6th down the list in price range for quarterbacks, behind some definitely worse talented quarterbacks in harder matchups. But I think the public, and this was DraftKings and FanDuel, and I think Vegas obviously too, they are not high on Oregon in this matchup. And it's kind of shocking to me just from, Herbert being, what he is, being a top quarterback prospect, and this Oregon team's supposed to be better than last year. And like you said, Auburn starting a quarterback who's his first collegiate game. You can't look past that. It doesn't matter if he's one of the best ever prospects coming in. a first game on this kind of stage, all eyes will be on them. It's not like this is a 4 o'clock game in the middle of a Saturday. This is, a prime time matchup, the only game on the schedule on Sunday. That's a big ask. And I'm kind of leaning towards just Oregon in general to win outright. But that line is kind of tantalizing, so I don't blame you for picking them.
Yeah, I'll take them. I don't feel great about it. It's my third of the three. But again, if this game was in Alabama and it was at Auburn's Jordan Hare, I would not take Oregon.
Yeah.
I'm not. I even if Oregon was getting 5 or 6 points, I wouldn't do it. But Oregon will travel, and the game is in Dallas. So yeah, the proximity does favor Auburn a little bit, and I know that the fans will travel there and they'll rally behind their kid to see what he does at quarterback. But boy, I think that this is one way or the other on this one, honestly, Dan. Like this kid Nix is either gonna have a great game or this thing could go right down to the wire and they could lose. So we'll see. So those are my 3 games. You've also reviewed 3 games, but I believe that you have an opinion on the Sunday night game, if I'm not mistaken. Houston and Oklahoma. And of course, I think that we're all very interested in this because this is one of those teams that a lot of people project to get to the Final Four, to get to that college football championship. They actually have a pretty decent team to play against on opening night. Most people feel Oklahoma will win, but of course, Jalen Hurts is now the quarterback there. And I obviously am very curious to see what he does. You rarely see a quarterback go from one good program to the next. This kind of reminds me a little bit in a different scenario when Russell Wilson left NC State and ended up going to Wisconsin in his last year. They had 2 big programs and they let him out. Well, they let Jalen Hurts out. Nick Saban let him go because of Tua. So what do you think happens, Dan, in this one? And does Oklahoma roll in this one? Does Boomer Sooner, or do they get caught opening night here with a little bit of an upset?
Yeah, well, so I gave you the 3 for the Saturday, but yeah, this one being on Sunday.
We'll just add a little added game. We'll throw an extra game in there. Why not?
Yeah. Well, for me, you mentioned all the changes, but you did not mention De'Aaron King, the Houston quarterback. This guy.
You know him from DFS. He's got to be the number 1 pick. He was. Yeah. We did a fantasy draft a couple of weeks ago on my fantasy show. He was the number 1 pick overall. So. Yeah, obviously there. But I will tell you, don't overlook Jalen Hurts. He did a lot of good things at Alabama too.
No, I know he did. But what I'm looking at here is that Houston is getting 23 points, and I know it's at Oklahoma, and I know Jalen Hurts and this offense is going to be one of the best in the country, and Oklahoma's national title contenders. But 23 points is a ton.
You're going to get another point out of this if you take Houston. It's 24. I got.
Is it 24 now? Okay.
24.
Mark me down for 24 then, because I can't see this being a 24-point win for Oklahoma, even though they're home and all those things going for them. Houston can score with the best of them, and maybe they'll lose in the end. I'd still pick Oklahoma to win, but Houston getting 24 points, that's 4 scores. So
I don't know, Servo. I don't know about this. This is the only one that I would be a little bit worried about.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Houston really fell apart at the end of last year. Like really fell apart. They had suspensions, they had injuries. They gave up 70 to Army or something in the bowl game. And when it comes to the first game out of the chute for me, when a team is coming off a horrible end of the season, I'm a little bit careful. Now, look, we're not going to agree on everything, obviously. I don't know that I would even bet.
I hope we didn't, by the
way. We're not going to. But for me, even though the line is big, and you're right, there's no question. And by the way, Oklahoma playing in the Big 12, they tend to give up a lot of points too. But I think the line is 24 for a reason here. I'm a little concerned for Houston coming off the year that they had last year. Their best defensive player, obviously, in the NFL, in Ed Oliver left also, although he decided he didn't want to play at the end of last year either. So we'll see. I hope it's a good game. But neutral site, give me the 24. In Norman, that team is so good against the spread. So good against the spread. So
I hear you.
We'll have to disagree on the final one, but I thought the other 3 very reasonable arguments for, and listen, from morning till night after I put up my hurricane shutters all around my house and pray, I'll be watching college football tomorrow. So that's what we will do. Any final thoughts here, Dan, before we go? Just to kind of review here, Dan likes tomorrow. He likes Florida State minus the 6.5. He likes the over in the Ole Miss Memphis game, which is 67, and also Boston College +4, in addition to taking Houston and the points at +24. My picks are Toledo +12 at Kentucky, the early game tomorrow, Louisiana Tech tomorrow night, getting 21 against Texas, and then Oregon +4 against Auburn. In general, on the live streams, I don't usually do 3 games is the most that I will ever do, and sometimes it's only 1 or 2, but we'll give the 3 for me, the 4 for Dan, and then, of course, we'll see what happens next week as Howard and I come back on Tuesday night and Friday night, and Howard and I on Tuesday night will review the Golden Nugget contest, which we are in this year, where we have to pick 7 games total, college and pro, and then the NFL games next week. So now that I've wrapped that up, Dan, any final thoughts here on anything from college football? I know that people can head on over to Fantasy Alarm and check out your DFS selections for tomorrow, so they can do that and get also your picks over at the Wager Alarm website. Did I miss out on anything?
No, that's about it. Just doing DFS all season long for Fantasy Alarm and giving some picks out on Wager Alarm, as you said. Those I'm pretty happy about the picks I've made. It probably come Sunday or Monday, I won't be as well. But
it happens. Yeah,
that's how the season goes. We'll make it up next week, right?
No, listen, it's all part of it. We had good weeks, we had bad weeks last year, and regardless if we were 4-0 or 5-0 or 0-4, 0-5, we were right back grading ourselves how we did every single week, and that's the fun part of this. The important thing is always, as it comes to wagering, is that understanding what your means is, understanding what your bankroll is, and managing it within percentages and using them on specific games, and don't getting too far ahead of yourself. Again, this is a long season. Whatever your bankroll is, probably at the most 5% of what that is on any game that you decide to wager on early in the season. And then as you win, obviously you can increase your wagers a little bit because you'll be playing with the house's money. So with that, that'll be it for our Friday night Wager Alarm live stream. Hopefully you guys do well off these picks. Also, don't forget, as Dan mentioned, to go over to wageralarm.com, check out all his picks for tomorrow. And for those of you who are playing in DFS, some really good options. I have a feeling Derek King could be one of those options tomorrow for Dan at quarterback from the Houston Cougars. Also, thanks again to Max Sells for producing our live stream tonight. Howard and I will be back next Tuesday for Dan Servadidio. I am Craig Mish. Have a great night, everybody.